What's normal? Is normal mental health? Is normal absence of illness? Or is normal absence of impairment? And I would argue the last. What is mental health? People have argued about that for 100 years. And we're limited in our understanding of this. But what you want to do is help the person go through these different life phases with minimal impairment in spite of whatever's thrown at them. In my third year of medical school, I worked 2 nights a week in a mental hospital in Winnipeg. And my buddy said to me, "Come on, Paul, let's go see the stroke in room 4. An astute clinician stopped us, and not so fast, fellas. There is no stroke in room 4. Mr. Smith is in room 4. Let me tell you about him. He was a brave Canadian who fought for his country. He came back from the war, married his high school sweetheart. They had 4 kids. Now they have 11 grandchildren. He worked for the post office all his life. He volunteered Little League baseball coaching. Oh, and yes, now that he's almost 80, he has experienced a stroke, which he's handling with great dignity. Mr. Smith is in room 4. There is no stroke in room 4. Empathy is central to the practice of psychiatry. I believe psychiatrists are best when they can fuse science with compassion. So you need a good, strong clinical medical background. You need to be able to understand and translate science to inform care. But then clinical judgment is critical. Clinical judgment is taking the science and distilling it to the person who's right in front of you. It's not enough to provide good treatment. You have to be superb at research, excellent at education, do prevention, public health, and, in fact, teach the public not to discriminate, not to dehumanize this group of people. I came to research with a single question at the beginning. I was seeing young women with anorexia nervosa, and I was very interested, what tells us when we're full? What is it in our brains? What is it in our guts? What is it through the body? Then it quickly became, when is it enough? Not just with food. What about drinking? What about smoking? What about exercise? What about sex? How do you know when to stop? And what I did in the 70s was say, let's study this from a variety of perspectives and find the actual risk factors, much as you can for heart disease or diabetes. And we developed a multi-dimensional model for anorexia, and that was the subject of the first book that came out in '82. That was the question I pursued over and over again. I owe a lot to my mentors. I had 3 outstanding mentors. My chief mentor, Harvey Stancer, was a scientist, and he insisted that I get scientific training after my residency. I had 2 other mentors. Robin Hunter was the chair of psychiatry, and in 1972, I worked very closely with him and found him inspirational because he was an outstanding clinical psychiatrist. And my third mentor, Vivian Rakoff, had a beautiful model of psychiatry. He always talked about the art and the science. In 1990, I moved to the University of Toronto to be chair of psychiatry. That was a job that could affect the next generation tremendously because U of T trains 25% of the psychiatrists, English-speaking psychiatrists of Canada. And during that time, I was by law, CEO of a small clinical research institute, the Clark Institute of Psychiatry. That was an exciting time. We were able to recruit, increase graduate students, increase funding, do excellent research. And regrettably, and this is really my doing as much as anybody's, we didn't really know how to connect to a broad community. We didn't consult often enough with stakeholders for them to tell us what they needed from us. So I'd probably say the Clark years taught me a lot, and maybe were a little bit harder. The opportunity in 1982 to move to Toronto General came totally out of the blue. It taught me that I could motivate a group, that I could collaborate, that at times I could be directive. I could be a good leader. I had vision. Most physicians looked down on psychiatry at that time. It was low on the totem pole of respect. The day I started, I happened to be seeing a patient on one of the wards at the Toronto General, and a cardiologist with his entourage introduced himself and said, "You must be Paul Garfinkel, you know, I've read about your coming." Introduced himself, and he said, "I want you to know I believe in psychiatry." And I was a bit startled because I hadn't been in a general hospital for a few years, and I said, "And I want you to know I believe in cardiology." The fact that psychiatry and neuroscience have become so important scientifically has had a big impact. I mean, so there has been significant improvement. The role modeling in medicine is hugely important. So what the clinical chiefs feel has a huge effect on the junior house staff. In 1997, the Clark became one of 4 that formed the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, CAMH. That probably was my most satisfying leadership role. The merger had one initial advantage and disadvantage, and that is it was a forced marriage. Nobody wanted it. Everybody was scared, everybody was angry. The fact that it was directed meant it was going to happen. It was very interesting because there were 2 addictions, 2 mental health. They balanced clinical range. They balanced academic and clinical. It really made the merger to have the 4 together. We were starting to think this organization needs a heart, a hub. Somebody said, "Well, how much is this first phase?" Pamela Freelich, for a joke, said, $100 million. Everybody laughed. Well, we raised $108 million. A wonderful community came on side. Now you could say, what would we have done if this didn't happen? I have no idea. We needed the money. Government was behind us. It was a great idea, but it was a hugely energetic volunteer community that made this happen. We ended up deciding that 30% of the board would be made up of patients and families. Very unusual in this kind of circumstance. Patients should be there on all the important committees, not just the board, some of the board committees. That signaled early on this was a new kind of enterprise. So you could imagine there were obstacles, but we were handed a gift. I don't know if Mike Harris's government or Duncan Sinclair realized what a gift they gave to this community when they forced these 4 to get together. I can't give you a single highlight. I mean, I loved working on anorexia. Like, there wasn't Was the Toronto General less than that? No. You know, to have Cam H, one of the 50 reasons to love Toronto in a Toronto Life story, you don't expect that for a mental hospital. I don't have a highlight. Those are all very, very significant. But I'm part of a process, you know. I'm part of a never-ending process of people saying, disadvantaged people deserve the same kind of care and respect that our society gives to others. It says something about us when we care for disadvantaged people. I've had a very, very good feeling about serving. You get so much back when you serve.